Hi everyone, welcome to Staying Connected. Today I have Aaron with me in person. We are continuing our adventure from the vEDS collaborative meeting yesterday. We had a family meeting today, and we are able to meet in person and talk about Aaron's story. You want to say hi?
Hello.
Hi. You're here in front of me, and this is kind of interesting because we have other people in the room, so
We have a live studio audience?
Yes, we have a live studio audience. Okay, so Aaron was diagnosed with vEDS, and he's going to tell us more about his story. So how old are you?
I'm 33.
And when were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed a year and a half ago.
Tell me about that.
So it starts with my father passed away 2 years ago, and I have a cousin who's on that side of the family that before he had passed away had kind of self-diagnosed herself with vascular EDS, which is a tough thing to really be able to do.
Yeah.
She has other medical issues that she's gone through, and she's kind of been on the search for a long time for what other things that she hasn't really been able to figure out medically. And so she had done a bunch of research and had kind of figured out, or thought that she had figured out, that this was something that she had. Her health insurance wasn't exactly the best, or if at all, to my knowledge. So she convinced her mother, my aunt, to go and get tested.
Okay.
And to see if it was something that she ended up having, because it is a genetic issue. So it could have been passed down to her. So it took my aunt, because there wasn't any prior history or anything of having vEDS, it took a long time for her to actually get her insurance to cover it.
Yeah.
So I think it was like a 9 month to a year process to actually get tested, during which time my dad passed away. So she, after all that time of making it happen, she ended up getting the test results back, and she tested positive.
And she was asymptomatic.
And she has some of the symptoms in terms of, she's never had an event, and she's in her, I mean, she would kill me for telling what her age is, but we'll say she's in her 40s, but she's older than that.
Okay.
Much older than that. So she has the signs in terms of kind of the facial aspects of it, and the some of the hypermobility, but the very lucid skin.
Right.
But nothing. Again, she's been really healthy. She's a health freak in terms of like her diet and the way that she eats and just kind of how she lives her life. It is a lifestyle for her.
Right.
Every day she wakes up and makes her shake that takes her 30 minutes to make, and like that's just her routine.
Yeah.
So she tested positive for this, and obviously it's a genetic thing. So while her son was getting tested, or her son ended up getting tested at the same time that I was getting tested, who is the original cousin's brother.
Okay.
And then myself. So I got my test results back, and I tested positive. He got his test results back and tested positive. And then the cousin that originally diagnosed herself with it ended up testing negative.
That's so interesting.
Which is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
So that's how I actually had a previous incident where I was in a car accident like 6 years ago, or maybe it was more, 6 or 7 years ago, and they did kind of a full body scan to see if there was any internal injuries that I wasn't aware of, or wasn't feeling, and they found a splenic aneurysm. And this is before I knew I had EDS.
Is that like on your spleen? Like
So
the
it's,
artery that feeds
it's the
your
artery
spleen?
that feeds your spleen, yeah.
Okay.
So they coiled that and stented that, without knowing that anything was, in terms of, having vEDS, was an issue. So once I had that done, there wasn't any complications to that surgery or anything. So there
Wow.
wasn't anything that kind of made them say, oh, you might have something else.
Right.
So I never really had any of the signs in terms of physical attributes. I kind of bruised always kind of easily, but nothing that ever kind of set off any alarms or anything. So I'm kind of less in the typical sort of vEDS physical attributes.
Okay.
But then when I was diagnosed, they did another full body scan, so this is a year and a half ago, to see if there was anything in there or in my body that would lead itself to having some sort of complications from the disease, and they found an aneurysm in my right carotid. And then I did a follow-up a year later to just kind of monitor that, and did another full body scan, so that was in March of this year, or February of this year. And they found two dissections in each one of my iliac arteries.
And which ones are your iliac arteries for people
So
that
your
don't know?
iliac arteries are the arteries that go from your... I actually don't know where it comes from, but they go basically to your legs. They're kind of the main veins.
It's like around your hip.
Yeah,
pelvis
they
area?
kind of go from I think it's like in front of your spine. They go from the top of kind of like your stomach area down, and then they split off into your legs.
Okay.
So I have one on each side of dissections, one on each side of my legs.
Do you feel those?
None. And I don't feel the one in my neck either.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm lucky in that sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of more of the approach that was taken for me was take a blood thinner, meaning a baby aspirin every other day, and then I take labetalol twice a day.
And what does that do?
So it's a beta blocker. It kind of minimizes the amount of kind of how your heart sort of beats. It makes it so that the amount of blood that's flowing through your arteries and your veins are going through at a little bit of a lesser speed, if you will.
Okay.
So that there's less pressure on your arteries and your veins, so that it's kind of easier for them to run smoothly, without any sort of, complications and stuff like that. The aspirin is for thinning my blood so that in the aneurysm that I have and the dissections that I have, that they don't form blood clots that can cause things like a stroke or things like that.
And that's what I'm on as a baby aspirin every day, too. So.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, super fun. The definition of fun.
Yeah.
Say.
Yes, I'd say it's a little bit more of a lifestyle choice. And by choice, I mean not a choice.
Right. So, I want to go back to diagnosis a little bit.
Sure.
So you talked about when you got diagnosed and how you got diagnosed. How did that feel? Like, what did that take you to when you first got diagnosed?
So once my aunt tested positive, that pretty much solidified that it's definitely in my gene pool. Well, it didn't, because I guess she could have been the only one, but because my dad had passed away and it was very sudden, he was a healthy guy, and then looking back at his history, he had an event when he was same age that I had my event at 32.
Okay.
And then he had another event in his 50s, and then he passed away at 68.
So what events were those?
His?
Yeah.
So the first one, which was the same as mine, was he had an artery in his colon tear. Well, no, the first one was a perforation, sorry. When he was in his 30s, which was the same as mine, he had a perforation in his large intestine.
Okay.
Which this is probably, let's see, if he was in his 30s, this is 35 years ago or something like that.
Okay.
So obviously medical technology and scientific evidence and things like that, especially for something like this, was basically zero. So I think my aunt was the one who ended up testing later, same aunt, was the one that took care of him while he was coming out of surgery, and she said that they chalked it up to the fact that he used to eat a lot of chicken, and they thought that it was like some sort of chicken bone that punctured through, like something dumb like that. So there wasn't, that was kind of just an explanation that they just, I mean, I guess they made up, because I can't imagine that they found a bone sticking through his large intestine or anything.
Right.
So I think, there wasn't any evidence to show, or I can't imagine that there was that much known about vEDS.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as a doctor, I imagine that you're looking for an explanation and you're not seeing one, so you're just, you're not thinking connective tissue disorder either.
Correct.
You're thinking of what could do this to somebody with normal tissue.
Yeah.
Not what's wrong with the tissue.
Exactly. So that was his first event. The second event was in his 50s, where he was sitting at a restaurant and he was having dinner with someone, and he said that he looked down and he was just covered in blood up to like his chest, and he didn't feel anything. He just all of a sudden was getting cold, and he looked down and he just noticed it.
Wow.
So they rushed him to the hospital, and he had to have major surgery, and it was like a a near death experience for him, and he ended up coming out of it after a long time of being in the hospital and things like that. But basically, he had a major artery in his colon just tear and burst, and just kind of started leaking out, and internally and externally.
Wow.
And then for the last one, was just kind of at home with my stepmom and said that he wasn't feeling so hot, and then he just, with 5 minutes later, gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do they
and
know
healthy.
What happened?
They think it was some sort of stroke caused by an aneurysm.
Yeah.
Because it was just so sudden, and it wasn't really like a clenching your chest kind of thing, so it wasn't a heart attack. But now knowing that I have vEDS means that he must have had vEDS, which means it's probably something related to that, which is usually some sort of aneurysm caused or dissection caused something. But because he didn't know, it wasn't getting scanned or wasn't being monitored or anything like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's an incredible story to go through all of those events and not.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't around, obviously, for the one at 32, but the
Right.
fact that him and I had the same one at the same age was pretty interesting.
So tell me about yours.
So mine was, so once I got diagnosed, I got in touch with Dr. Byers and Dr. Shalhoub, and I came up after I got diagnosed to meet with, Dr. Shalhoub wasn't as much in the picture at that point,
Right.
Because this is like a year and a half ago. So I met with Dr. Byers with my wife, and we kind of just got the lay of the land on what vascular EDS was, and kind of the steps on what I need to do, and the team that I need to put in place, and all of that stuff. So it was kind of put in place that I was going to have a scan once a year once I found the aneurysm in my right carotid, to monitor that as opposed to just going in and fixing it or removing it or whatever. To just get a scan once a year and see if it gets larger, and then kind of deal with it on a case-by-case basis. So it had been a year since that first initial scan. I had gotten another scan, and the plan was come up to Seattle to meet with him and Dr. Shalhoub to go over that scan. And so it was fly up on a Tuesday night, sleep over on Tuesday night, have our consultation on Wednesday, and then leave Wednesday night, so just be here for 24 hours.
Right.
And on the Tuesday in the afternoon before I came here, I started feeling a little, just kind of nauseous, a little off. Nothing crazy, but kind of, I hadn't eaten that much that day, so I was like, oh, maybe I'm just like low blood sugar or something like that. Get on the plane, come to Seattle, sleep, wake up the next day. I'm with my wife. My wife is from Seattle. And so we went to breakfast with her and her parents, and before breakfast I started like just feeling a little like it became more painful. It went from discomfort to more pain. So but not like debilitating. Go to breakfast, start getting a little bit worse, and breakfast a little bit worse, come back home now we're like 3 hours before the meeting to go over the scans with Dr. Byers and Dr. Shalhoub. Pain's now getting like kind of bad. So I call Dr. Byers, ask him if I can come in early. He says no problem. Go in, sit with him and Dr. Shalhoub in like a waiting room or in like a consultation room. They could tell that I wasn't, like at this point now I'm like kind of having trouble walking, having trouble sitting, just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They were like, let's just go get a CT scan, see what's going on. So I go down to the emergency room at University of Washington, and I'm there for 10 minutes, and I look at my wife, and I'm like, something's wrong, and I just blacked out in the waiting room.
Oh my gosh.
And I came to not long later, but I was in the emergency room, and they had like the EKG hooked up and everything, and it was, let's just go get that CT now. So they saw a bunch of blood in my stomach due to internal bleeding, but it wasn't coming from a major artery or a major vein. So they didn't really know exactly where it was coming from, and it wasn't like there was this onslaught of a lot of blood coming all at the same time. It had just kind of been slowly leaking over the past 24 hours. But I'd lost a decent amount of blood, but again, it wasn't coming from somewhere that was like major. So at first it was, let's go in and let's find it and let's stop it. And kind of wrote signed all the anesthesiology paperwork and was getting ready for surgery, and you guys tell me that this is what I should do, I'm in. And then the surgeon that came in that was supposed to do the surgery came in and just kind of was like, I wanted to meet the person I'm going to do this with, and started talking to him for like 10 minutes, and he's like, honestly, I thought I was going to walk into somebody that was in debilitating pain that needed to have emergency surgery right now. We're having like an actual dialogue, and you're obviously in some pain, but not enough that it makes me go, let's do this now.
Right.
So maybe because it's coming from a place that's kind of unknown, and due to the condition that you have, I'd rather not do the surgery if I didn't have to. And a lot of times if it's coming from a smaller place, then that means that it'll kind of stop on its own.
Right.
So it was decided that why don't we just wait a minute and see if it stops, and we'll monitor your blood loss and see if it's slowing down and if it eventually slows down to a stop. So they monitored me for 3 days in the ICU, kind of my own room or whatever. And it was a rough, because I wasn't allowed to have food or water for those 3 days in case I had to get rushed into surgery. So it was just, and then they had to take my blood every 15 minutes for those 72 hours to monitor the amount of blood flow that was happening to see if it was like speeding up or slowing down. So
that sounds miserable.
It was a rough 3 days, but it was a lot of, me and my wife is incredible, and she was with me the entire time, and it was kind of just a lot of, this is the most miserable thing in the world, let's make fun of it.
Right.
So it was just, you kind of got to turn it into a positive at some point. And
yeah.
we were 3 months from getting married or something. So it was just kind of like, oh, good timing. Like, this is great.
Well, better before the wedding than at the wedding.
Or sooner to the wedding, where it would end up canceling the wedding. Yeah,
the
exactly.
schedule. At least you got a head start on the schedule.
Yeah. So after the 3 days, they saw that the blood had stopped in terms of the leak, if you will, but I was still in pain, and they couldn't figure out what the pain was coming from. So they said, let's go do another CT scan. So we get the CT scan back, and they saw air in my stomach, meaning that there was a perforation somewhere in my intestine, and that's something that you can't really wait on. You got to go in, because then a lot of things start to cross-contaminate and things like that.
You can go into sepsis, right?
Yeah. So it was just kind of time so within 2 hours I was in surgery, and they had to take out a 5-inch piece of my large intestine.
Wow.
And yeah, so basically they cut that area off for the time being, that large intestine area.
Yeah.
So at the current moment, I have a colostomy bag.
Oh, you do?
I do, which I've had since, I guess it's March. And I went and had a colonoscopy recently to make sure that it's all healed properly over the last few months.
Yeah.
And everything seems good, so I'll be able to or they'll attempt to do a reversal probably in either September or November.
That's exciting.
To line things back up.
That's really exciting.
It's good.
So you just happened to be here for a scan.
Yeah.
And then had a major event.
In the hospital, where there happens to be one of 3 specialists in the world.
That has got to be
there's some
very, very lucky
there's some serendipity
scenario.
there.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, that's obviously something that's happened to you recently.
Yeah.
Fairly recently. How has your life changed other than that event since diagnosis? Are there things that you do differently that maybe you didn't think about before? Yeah,
it's definitely made me, so because of just vEDS in general, you don't want to be as, I was decently physical in terms of I played volleyball every week, and didn't work out as much as I say that I worked out. But some working out and things like that. But you kind of want to make sure that your heart rate and your just those kinds of things are kind of working at a minimal level so that you're not stressing your body out. So because of the surgery also, volleyball's kind of, I put that on pause for a little bit until I've recovered, probably from this second surgery.
Yeah.
Eating habits in terms of diet, just to make things kind of run smoothly in my body, is just eating really healthy.
Yeah.
Not a lot of dairy, not a lot things that are easy to digest, things that are not a lot of roughage and stuff like that, because those things kind of just tend to flow through your body without it getting actually broken down. So things that are kind of easily broken down, and things that are gonna, I think diet definitely has a lot to do with the way that your body just kind of operates.
Yeah.
And more so now than ever. I love cheese more than anything. It's like my favorite thing in the world. But if it's going to affect the way that my body chemistry is kind of going through itself, then I kind of figure I got to put that to a minimum, at least for now, until I'm up and running again. But I feel like now that it's just kind of habit and just kind of part of the routine,
Yeah.
and I feel better, then you just kind of go with it.
You said you keep it to a minimum. I'm guessing you still cheat with cheese.
Every
now
once
and
in a
then.
while, you can't not have a slice of pizza if it's in front of you. Or like if there's a sandwich and it happens to have a slice of cheese on it, I might not take it off. But if I'm ordering something, there's kind of this part of my brain that goes, don't add it. Let's just keep it off. So stuff
Yeah.
like that. So it's all about balance.
Yeah. And emotionally, you seem like you're doing well.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I have an extremely supportive wife and family and friends, and everyone's just been kind of great. It's actually, if anything, it makes it more fun because now I can kind of give my friends dead arms and they can't punch me back.
I guess it's a perk, being able to hurt your friends.
My friend Matt Flood is very upset by this.
So along those lines of having a good support system, today we met over the last 2 days really, we've met a bunch of people with this. And for me, before this meeting, I had only met one person in person with this.
Mm-hmm.
So how has that been for you?
It's been great. It's been a very eye-opening experience, especially listening to people that are kind of at the beginning of finding out, or even if they haven't been at the beginning of finding out, at the beginning of finding out that there are other people that not only have this, but that there's research being done, and that there's people across the globe that are doing this research and figuring out new drugs or different drugs that are different. Vitamin C has been, people are starting to think that might be something that can really help with stuff like this. So I think not only for me to learn, because within the first 3 to 6 months, you go from knowing nothing about this to just this overload of information on not only other people, but just kind of how this all works and how the rest of your life needs to go about itself. Mm-hmm. So meeting other people that not only have it is, I guess, maybe empowering. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's just somewhat that you feel less alone. You feel more like that there's a support system outside of your friends and your family that really know how it is to be a part of this, and also that my case, I'm fortunate enough to, yes, I have not a great version of this disease, but there are people that unfortunately are having a tougher time. Mm-hmm. That it kind of puts things into perspective. And when you meet people that are having a rougher time, that also have a positive outlook and that are being proactive about it and are putting together their medical teams so that if something happens, like all of these things that you kind of put into place kind of makes you go, okay, this is doable.
Yeah.
Like people, whether they have it the same or have it worse or have it better, it's all kind of one community that are trying to come together and find funding for this and to advance just figuring out how to deal with this on a scientific basis and on a personal basis. It's great.
Yeah, I feel pretty much the same.
Yeah.
It's been amazing, to meet you and all of the other people here, and even the people who don't have it and their families are here. Their family members passed away, and they're doing their best to raise awareness and participate in funding for research and all of these things. It's super incredible to see, and it's super, super hope providing to see, Shireen Shalhoub and Peter Byers and Melissa Russo and Shane Morris, these names
Lauren.
of doctors that you see online or something, and then you finally get to meet them. Is pretty cool.
Yeah, they're almost they're just like celebrities in this
right.
world that just know. Especially Shireen and Peter. I have trouble calling them by their first names.
Me
I call
too.
them by Peter. I call them by Dr. Byers and Dr. Shalhoub.
I'm just getting used to it.
Yeah, I'm not there yet. Especially since I was here and Dr. Shalhoub was literally holding my hand as I was getting wheeled into the emergency room to have the surgery, and it's just the amount of, and these are people that don't have this disease that are just kind of fascinated by it
Yeah.
and want to know and want to help and are just in this selfless way just wanting to be advocates for it. And there's really no reason outside of just sort of a personal need to be a part of this community and to help. And
Yeah,
it's very inspiring.
it is, for sure. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with the listeners, or?
I mean, only that it really is great to, and first of all, what you're doing is fantastic, just in terms of getting the word out on what this is and that people aren't alone, and they're, for me, at first it was, okay, so I'm only going to tell my family, and then it was, all right, I should probably tell my friends too, because what am I going to keep this a secret? And you kind of start, everybody has their own sort of path on how they need to either tell people or don't tell people, and there are people that have it in their family that don't want to get tested, and you just kind of, you don't want to judge anyone because you can't, because everybody, there are no rules to any of this, so it's whatever makes you feel comfortable. For me, I think it's been great learning and meeting people like you that I'm just learning stuff that I didn't know anything about, any of these societies that some of these people have that are raising awareness and raising funds, and it's just, if you're feeling uncomfortable or you're feeling scared, it is a scary thing, and it's not to be held lightly, but the more that you kind of put yourself out there, the more that, at least for me, it's been sort of, it's made me feel safer inside my own sort of world, where it's like, okay, even though I'm going through my day-to-day life and nobody that I'm really interacting with has this or knows anything about it, you kind of got it in the back of your head that there's a small community that really does get it. And if you need something like that, I mean, everybody's an email away.
Yeah, they're right there.
And a lot of these people, most of these people, are willing to get on the phone with you if they want to, or a Skype call, or will even meet you if they're in your city, or whatever it is. There are these conferences that we've had this week. It's like there's people around that want to help and want to communicate. So if you want to be one of those people, or you're hesitant, but in the back of your mind you're like, I would love to talk to somebody about this that really gets it, they're around.
Yeah, that's been
You just got to reach out, but you have to reach out.
Yeah, you do. And along those lines, I'm always open to talking to people with this. So if you're listening and you have this and you want to share your story, please reach out. I'm not a scary person.
You are like the least scary person on the planet.
I try not to be too intimidating. But yeah, reach out and we'll talk. Whether or not you want to be on the podcast or you just want to talk about your story with somebody, there are people out here. So
thanks for having me.
Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
It's really been great to meet you.
Very much to meet you as well.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This was Staying Connected, and this was Erin. Episodes are coming out on the last Sunday of every month, and hopefully that schedule will continue for a very long time, if not get more frequent, hopefully. But for right now, last Sunday of every month. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.